Johnny, I'd really love if you could share. Was there an aha moment that happened when you knew that you wanted to be an engineer?
Mm, no, there isn't actually. There was no
What?
aha moment for me.
Okay, so how did this culminate? Like, how did this build up in your, in the front of your brain? Like when you realized everything was leading to this. Was there a person or a situation that influenced you?
I think with everything in life, right, the journey is never a straight line, and we appreciate that. So for me, being an engineer was kind of ingrained in me, I would say. I'm a child of two engineers,
Mhm.
two electrical engineers, even though they focus on two very different parts of electrical engineering. My dad's a signals and systems person. My mom is more of a automation controls, circuits person. And so growing up, engineering is effectively the only profession. There was no choice, right? There was engineering or else. And so I grew up with a pretty, I would say, high expectations from my parents to be good at STEM. The Because they felt like there was no, you know, gender difference or anything. They said this is what we do, and both your parents can do it and you can do it too. And so engineering is the only viable future. And so because of that, I think growing up, I did like math a lot. I love science, and they cultivated that with me too. Because being engineers, they obviously like to play with tech, they like to experiment. And so, growing up, I had a lot of, at home experiments with my parents that just fostered this interest in science and technology and
Mhm.
engineering. Um, However, I would say that, you can only go so far in a future that's defined to you by your parents, right? And so I, even though I always thought I was going to be an engineer. I grew up thinking and doing and being an engineer. There was a point in time where you know, maybe it's the teenage rebellion, or it's, you start to think for yourself and you think, well, I really haven't seen the world. And I really challenged myself to say whether or not being an engineer and the engineering path is actually the right career path for me. So I took a different stance. I said, I need to go try other industries. I need to go try other professions. And I look for an opportunity to do that. And the best way through that I found was through management consulting, actually, to just do
Hmm.
different things, see different things. And after that journey, I can legitimately say to myself, after doing a lot of the strategy consulting, marketing consulting, business analyst, all those different things, I came back to the fact that I love engineering. I love all those other things too in context of engineering. But the tech for me is really the secret sauce. It's what's driving our society forward. It's what's creating new ideas in people, and I love that. And that fascination, I think, brought me back to engineering. And I think this time, it's my choice. It's not a guided choice by your parents. But I've seen the other things that I've come back to it, and I realized I really do love tech. I love engineering. I love the possibilities that it brings, and I love being able to tell other people about how you can use this tech to do amazing things. And so it's, maybe if that's the aha moment, it definitely took me a long route to get back to my aha moment that I was where I belong.
I can hear in your voice the passion and how strongly you feel about this. And I loved what you said about, you took a lot of turns along the way. Um, and also, you brought up your family dynamic. And I think for a lot of us who come from immigrant families, and in particular, or any family who, who has, for some reason or another, like it's a family tradition to be
Yeah.
engineer or doctor or lawyer or whatever, um, that it can be difficult, a difficult time in the family dynamic to choose another path or to question.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Question what is, has been accepted as the only right path that you could take. Was that was that hard to have that conversation with your parents, or did you do it in secret and then let them know?
The absolutely, it was absolutely hard. You're absolutely right. This like I said, when you're a child of two engineers, it's very difficult for them to imagine why you don't want to be an engineer, you know. And I had and at the time actually I had already graduated from college, from Berkeley, electrical engineering, computer science. I was working in AMD expansion, you know, doing integrated circuits, and I was doing really well. In fact, you know, I think it was one of the youngest people in the company to actually patent on bit line discharge and things of that sort. And so my
Okay.
dad was like, you know, you've got a good career in engineering, right? He's expecting me to go for a PhD, and you know that's where he saw my trajectory. And all of a sudden, I came back to him like, I'm not sure I want to be an engineer, and it was like a shock to the system, right? And I told him that I was gonna go take the GMATs because I think I need to go to business school because that's how people change careers is go to business school. Um, and he was affronted by it, and he told my mom that he couldn't support it, and if this was a decision that I wanted to make, you know, he wouldn't support me financially, which is okay. I was already working, but he actually has said to my mom, he's like, don't let her come crying back when she screws up her life. You know, it was a pretty harsh phrase. And I think just my own personality, I was like, well, I own up to my own decisions, right? And, you know, this is going to be self funded. I'm going to do it myself. And I'm going to take all of the savings that I had working before to go after this career and see what happens. And I don't know if it's justified at the end because you know nowadays my dad still tells me, "See, you still came back to engineering," but at least it was a self fulfilled route, right? So that I know what I'm going and doing.
I I'm really glad we're having this discussion because this exact topic comes up so much with people that I speak to and meet, that it's a thing,
Yeah.
family expectations
Hmm.
versus your own innate curiosity about other things. And like you said, there's a little bit of rebellion, mixed
Yes.
into that. But I really loved what you said about, okay, well, I own this decision and I will self fund because that's also,
Right.
you know, a decision, a choice, and a commitment, right?
Right.
Oh, it's self funded. That means I have to be all in. I have to be sure. I have to have thought this through. So
That's right.
I think that that's like a really great piece of advice. Think it through and measure it, pros and cons. And I think that once you have your own skin in the game, maybe the way that you think about things changes, maybe dramatically. Maybe
Right.
it's that much more serious of a commitment. Anyway,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think that's great advice for our listeners, who I know have encountered similar situations or maybe are going through this themselves right now. So thank you for because that's very personal, and I recognize that not everyone talks about that family dynamic aspect of our careers, how much they were
Right.
influencing you or even
Right.
pushing. Um, but
But
now you get to say, "Dad, you were right."
I think the other element of it, which is, you know, I mean, from a just from a mentality perspective, right? If you look at your own personal career, if you look at family dynamic, if you look at technology itself, it doesn't progress linearly and it doesn't progress without crossing a chasm, you know? And I
That's
think
great.
whether it's a technology disruption, business model disruption, and it comes back to, you know, personal disruption. If you always follow a singular line, you know, you may feel like, oh, I'm very safe in the singular line, but at the same time, you haven't explored all the other roads that are next to it. And at the same time, you may not have that breakthrough, like just as you said, that aha moment. It's self-created, really self-inflicted in a way,
Yeah, yeah.
right? But you yourself kind of sort of cross that chasm of a better understanding of where you want to be and where you want to go.
And I like that you're invoking the phrase "crossing the chasm." Whether you're a startup or it's your own career and your own
Correct.
life, you need that extra juice to jump across. It's not like, oh, I'm gonna put one step in front of the other. At some point, you need that boost. Where does that boost come from? It has to come from inside. To
Right.
right, it's that alchemy part of the
Right.
equation. The Yeah. Um, let's talk about what made you choose software coming from a electrical engineering background. What made you choose software?
uh it's a little silly, but a lot of
We like
people.
silly.
So, like I said, I was an electrical engineer, building circuits, designing, memory chips, and and things of that sort. And as a hobby, I got into video games. That's why I said like it's silly, right? So I was very, very into computer games. My husband will say that I was a bit addicted and kind of took it to a whole different level of commitment, but I was really into it.
Okay.
And
Oh, wait. Well,
yeah.
pause. What was your game of choice? We have to know.
I was a diehard Blizzard fan. So StarCraft, Warcraft, and then of course World of Warcraft in my generation
Hmm.
was a huge game. Got overly excited about the whole virtual world and all that stuff, right? And was consumed by it. But part of that too also just invoked a different interest in me. So I've always been EECS at Berkeley. I've always taken computer science classes, but it was more programmatic, like go do these, programs, and it felt more repetitious to me there, right? But when thinking about how it could be applied in computer games and video games, they created a whole different like artistic and creative element to it. And then I was really fascinated at how software could actually create all these different experiences. And so this is how I kind of made that transition. And I think part of it is also, if I did not leave electrical engineering, go to business school, was fascinated by computer games. It was all kind of a culmination of perfect storm, right? I would not have really been that serious into software
Yeah.
until that point. And at that point, I was very dedicated. I was so fascinated by the technology of software and the possibility of the experiences. I legitimately considered going into video games, and truth be told, I did try very hard to get into video games. I think I tried to interview with Blizzard, Activision, Ubisoft, all the big game makers to see if there could be a career there. None of them took me at the end of the day.
Obviously, it was their loss. Yeah. Obviously, that was a big fail on their part. Yeah.
But it never stopped that interest. I continue to love the possibilities, and even today in my job now, I think the really exciting part of it is technology is there to help you create new experiences for people to explore and feel and understand new things. And I get to do that today in a little bit different of a format, but that's how software I was provoked and seduced by software, if you will, to go toward that side of engineering.
So I think that understanding now what it was that seduced you away from electrical and into software is amazing, and actually also not surprising. right? Because I mean, you know, in the generation where these kinds of games were becoming more established in the
Yeah.
cultural mainstream, it's not surprising at all. But I think that they're like as a mother, you know, my kids are much older now, but we tried to expose them to a lot of different things, and one of the things was um, game design.
Hmm.
And in order to for them to be considered game design, well, they have to be able to play games.
Hmm.
And you know, a lot of parents aren't into that.
Yeah.
But then there are other parents who are as much into it as their kids are. So you know, there's kind of like both camps.
Yeah.
But so you know, like if I don't know if you have kids or have, you know, nieces or nephews or kids in your life. If you were in the situation where you're having to decide, you know, whether or not gaming is allowed, or is it like
Yeah.
a special treat, or is it, you know, a regular part of the day?
Uh-huh.
Where would you, how would you lean on that? Like how do you make those kinds of or you know decisions? Like how much is too much?
Yeah.
As a self-professed possibly an addict. I mean, you know, at one point
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah, yeah. Well, I will be honest, you know, 10, 15 years ago before I had kids, as much of a diehard fan as I was, I had often joked with my husband. I was like, oh, once we have kids, we can, you know, raid together. So I'm one of those bad parents, right? But my son is 6, and he obviously loves games as most kids love games. For us, it's a combination. It's a treat sometimes. It's also family activity. I do play the games with him,
Mhm.
um, and you know, it's been a learning experience. I'm pretty fascinated by the new types of games there are. Right, they're highly educational. There's a whole set of games that's all based off of, you know, doing puzzles and math and writing and all that stuff. So I think that the gamification of learning has been, uh, in my opinion, a great benefit to to kids
Agree.
and to
Yeah.
the generation, just to have more interest in learning, right? Um, and then also, I was playing this game with him where I guess it's kind of like coding, uh, because it teaches them about recursion and how to, you know, put down commands that are more simplistic in order to do something that's repetitive, which is with recursion. And I had never thought of that, and I didn't actually learn about recursion until my first day at Cal. When they're like, who here knows recursion? And I was not one of those people. Right. And but now it's like, I mean, he's 6 years old. I mean, he was introduced to it when he was like 5 or something, and he knows how to like put together an algorithm, in a not like a coding way, but in the way that he thinks. And I think that that logic, exercise is really useful, and that's just useful across the board in any one of our professions. But for a child to think logically on how they can optimize the way that they are, you know, programming or doing anything in their lives, right? So and I think optimization is a skill in any industry. So in my mind, it's a benefit.
Good. Yeah, that is great. That is I think that this is a lot of times there's this friction between generations, you know, cuz like in my generation we didn't have games like that. We did have video like my first video game was Defender on the Apple IIe.
Hmm.
And, you know, that like we were definitely the only household in our neighborhood who had one. Um, and so but that was like the beginning of this interest. And if you are of a certain type of mind, you become curious. Oh, how do they do that?
Right.
How does that work? And that's when you start going into the behind the scenes stuff, right? So, like these games that is it Roblox that you're talking about?
No, it's like called Prodigy or something. It's a school based game.
Yes. Yes,
Yes.
it is, Prodigy. Very aptly named. But, like to teach these concepts and how to do it at such an early age is really, I feel like, a real benefit to
Yeah.
society, right? Because, you know, like you said, the gamification of education.
Hmm.
I sorry, I'm going off. I'm not, they're going to edit this out. But I went to a talk by Jane McGonigal, who's a PhD in gamification.
Mm.
She researches how gamification affects people, basically. And so
Yeah.
this talk was all about how games are where the best and the worst of humanity come out to
Yes.
play. You know, like it
Yes.
invoke, but where else are you going to get total strangers who have never seen or met each other in the physical world to collaborate and achieve this goal,
Right.
right? Through all of these challenges and things like that. And so she used those concepts to work on like social projects. Like one of them
Right.
was helping some, you know, researchers on protein folding, and so she somehow gamified it, and they were
Uh-huh.
able to do like in 10 days what the researchers had not been able to do in 10 years,
Uh-huh.
literally 10
Yeah.
years. Anyway, so she's written a couple of books about it, but it was super interesting. Okay, sorry, back to our podcast. All right, thank you for that story. That was great. Okay, so let's talk about what it's like being a woman in a STEM field. You mentioned that management consulting was a great way to sort of bring all of these different interests and skill sets of yours together, and maybe also a way to sample
Right.
different functions, right? And it's like, it's so true. It's like, it's a great industry to experience all those different things, and even a great industry to bring those skills and experiences together and define a career in that way. Um, was it hard for you to, of course it was hard. What were some of the challenges you faced in finding your seat at the proverbial table? Um, Not just, you know, not at any specific employer, but, you know, throughout your career. Was it hard, and how did you um, overcome some of these obstacles for being heard, being respected, um, and, you know, of, of being able to contribute to strategy, to, you know, execution, and so on? Was it hard, and what were some of the challenges?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have to say that I feel very lucky that I have been in environments where I've felt empowered. And maybe it's by accident, but I do feel very lucky that um, in a variety of my jobs, I've always had sort of a work champion, if you will, who didn't pull me back, who let me be bold and say the things that are on my mind. And I think that I wouldn't be able to stop it anyway, just the being authentic to myself. And I told you before, sort of the defiant nature that I have in terms of doing what's being asked of me. you know, I, I'm the kind of person that can't sit still and just let it go. Because I think when I think that there is a better way to do something, or there's a new idea that needs to be introduced, I will say it. And I'm not considering the people in the room, the political dynamics, all these things. I feel like, as a maybe because when I was younger in my career, I didn't understand it either. There was a purpose. Let's go fix and solve the problem. And here's all of my ideas on how you could solve it. We don't have to use them all, but I'm not going to not tell you and be limited by it. And in surprisingly and fortunately for me, I've always been in environments where I've had a manager, a leader, someone who said to me, you know, let her speak, right? And just give her that opportunity to say what she needs to say. And if it's not right, it doesn't matter. We'll still work through other things. But to foster that type of openness, transparency, and that's a learning that I've taken throughout my career too. I told my team, I'm nothing but honest with you, right? I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. This is what I'm dealing with. This is what you're going to see too, because that transparency is how you would cultivate innovation and how you would cultivate an open mind. And
And
so,
trust, and trust. Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. And so, I think that, my challenge has been, when do I stop being so open about everything? But I've really been quite lucky that I've found champions that allows me to be able to voice my thoughts. And I think that, as an advice to is, you need to look for those types of teams. You need to look for those types of leaders, right, who will value you for your opinion and your thought. Um, you had a question on, was it more challenging being a woman in this type of field? And absolutely, it is. I think that we naturally take a discount when we get to the table. It becomes even more important in the 30 seconds impression that you make, that you show people you know what you're talking about. And so, but once you do that, then that discount goes away immediately, right? Because, and in fact, they probably feel bad that they gave you that discount to begin with. So, if anything, you know your tech, you know your subject. You go in there and you show them, and you show them fast. In that first 30 seconds, you have to stand up for yourself and be like, I understand the nature of this, and this is my opinion. I've seen mentees of mine who struggle with this type of challenge. And there is whether it's imposter syndrome or just a psychological dynamic, that they feel like, oh, maybe I'm too abrasive if I speak out too harshly or too directly, or I double check my words by adding a bunch of qualifiers around it, like, I think, maybe, all those things that exude insecurity will discount you. And so, from my personal learning, and like I said, it's also one of my faults, is to be there with confidence. You know yourself the best on what you understand of that subject matter. And if you understand it and you tell the truth on what you believe is a possible solution or multiple solutions, no one can discount that from you. And in fact, you've now established credibility that you do know the subject. They should not have discounted you from the beginning, and that you do have a place at that table.
Yeah, well said. Do you think that, I mean, I feel like that, what you're saying is not only advice to women seeking a seat at the table, but also to leaders as they welcome talent, you know, to their table, and how you can, I mean, there are some leaders who are very in tune with developing talent. And there are some leaders who are definitely not.
Yeah.
And they'll on purpose not support or not, you know, open that space for a new voice. And you made the point of look for teams who have leaders who will champion you and support you, back you up. Um, um, is it? Do you think that's a prerequisite to having a successful career?
It's not a prerequisite, but it'll make your life harder, because then you have to prove yourself over and over again, which is inefficient. If I go back to my optimization kind of speech earlier. Um, I think diversity and the in our today society, we're all moving toward fostering this diversity. There's a way to do it right, and there's also a way to do it wrong that I've seen from my career too. I mean, I have been in a position where a senior leader have said pretty abrasively, I am looking for this profile between these ages, female, and etc. And I think that's the wrong way to do diversity. You don't want to come into an opportunity being labeled as the diversity candidate. That's not what you want to be known for, right? You want to be known for your chops, your craft, your subject. And so I think, in my opinion, that's the wrong way to do diversity. Instead, I have seen it done really well where it's all about fostering a different opinion, because there is homogeneity when you always hear the opinion from the same set of people or the same makeup and diversity of the people. It's really important to see a different population and have them reflect on what it is that's happening. That's true for market studies. It's true for population research. It's true for any type of idea where you're brainstorming and crafting and creating. And so, in that context, what you want to solicit opinion. An opinion comes from a lot of different form factors and a lot of different types of people. And that's the best way that I think you can gather the most comprehensive creative ideas to go solve a problem, instead of saying I'm looking for this typeface. It's that's I think the wrong way to do it.
Right, right. Um, I want to talk about how do you see the field of tech in it. Let me rephrase this. Technology as an industry has been at the forefront, I think, of not only like scientific innovation, but also at the forefront of trying to create um, a diverse employee pool, a diverse talent pool. I mean, obviously, it's not been a complete success yet, but it has been an industry that had some awareness, varying degrees of success there. Um, but when you compare it to other industries, I wouldn't say that they're any worse off than at some of the traditional industries. Um, would do you have an opinion on why it's so important for tech to get it to have the most um, diverse representation for people who are working on the technology? Is it important, especially for tech, to make sure that the people who work on technology solutions are reflective of their customers and clients?
Oh, absolutely. Um, it's absolutely critical that tech, being a leader in industry, also be a leader in diverse opinions and context. And I think this is especially true as we talk more and more about AI and data science and the like. I had a really fascinating conversation with a colleague on, what's really different between AI and our human brain, and how does all the advancements we're making in AI change or affect the usefulness of human interaction? And fundamentally, it's irreplaceable. And a big element of that is actually because of diversity, is because of context, right? And if you think about a program, even an AI program, even generative AI program, it's still operating off of a set of data and information, and it's leveraging that information to provide an answer. That large language model or that data set or whatever is the foundation model, and they call it the foundation model for them to go make those recommendations. But what it doesn't have is the decades of experience, history, personal influence, right? That a human undergoes since they were born until, whenever they're making that decision. And that's irreplaceable. And so the context and your experiences and your diverse opinions absolutely change the way that we think, we reference, we make a decision. And so in the field of technology, especially as we're making advancements in AI and data science, you have to have that diverse contextualization, right? You have to take in opinions from all different cultures, all different societies, all different age groups, because you otherwise you would be building a system that would be incomplete and biased, right? And nobody wants a biased system to go and help us to determine and decide on new factors. So the diversity element in tech companies is critical to think about how a technology would be used and manifested in a lot of different environments, geographies, use cases, applications. All those different reasons mean that you need different points of view on how it will be utilized. Um, and that is what makes us superior. This is what makes us human, right? Our individual histories and experiences is what crafts us and makes us make different decisions. Like you and I were saying, we're kind of polar opposites. It's all because of something that was, sort of nurture, right? After that nature element, it's all nurture and your own personal experiences. And so we have to take that into account. It's what makes us human. Being diverse is what makes us human. And I highlighted that in order to create itself, the creativity, innovation means you have to have a lot of different points of view. And that's the best way to create the best result, right, for everyone is to be able to infuse all those different points of views, all those different contexts together.
Curious, I mean, that just seems logical to me that if you have a diverse user base, then you should have a diverse, developer base. But why do you think some this is such a hard thing for, some companies to actually enact? Like, I think that everyone pays lip service to this, but then the product or the service comes out and it's quite obvious that they didn't do this. What do you think holds teams back from making the right decisions about that, about design and development?
There's a couple of challenges I think that stands in the way. Uh, I think from a people and resource perspective, there is a limitation, even as you're trying to infuse new ideas in, that the demographic today, let's say, of female engineers is just going to be lower. And that's, no matter how much they try, right, on pushing for let's hire more and let's get more of that opinion. If the demographic is lower, it's going to be a harder time to actually bring them in. So there's a scarcity problem, which there's other ways to fix that, from education, from support, and all that, all the way from the beginning. Um, there's another piece which isn't uh, really the tangible or the real reason, the scarcity part, but it is, in my opinion, uh, people don't like to be contradicted. And when you expose yourself and you advocate for diverse opinions, you're gonna have people who are gonna tell you you're wrong, and people don't like that. I think naturally, as humans, we don't like that. You know, we don't like people telling us, "No, I don't think your idea is
I
the
don't know
right
what you're
one."
talking about. Yeah.
So it's an active challenge. I think each of us have to make individually. That have to take feedback. We have to listen to other opinions. Don't write off other people's opinions because it's against nature. I think for us to go incorporate people who don't think like us.
Yeah.
And could advocate for a solution that's completely polar to what we were originally thinking. And I think that's a personal and a psychological barrier that as leaders we all have to kind of cross and say, no, I have to push against that innate sense to protect my own idea and to be open to other types of ideas.
It's so true. It's like a self-preservation instinct or
It
something
is.
in the limbic brain. But what's interesting is that when you think about some of the most successful companies, they've done that. They've been able to do that. They've learned to resist that impulse and incorporate diverse opinions and perspectives. So interesting. We'll leave it at that.